Good. So it's one experience to do that breathwork seated, and then it will be pretty much a different experience doing that lying down. So we'll do it lying down later on. And I find that breathwork technique very powerful because it just reminds us of the alchemy that we create, the bridging point that we are between two worlds, between the physical world, the limited world, and the divine vast world. So it's kind of a reminder of what we are. And one of the best symbols for that is a cup. A cup which has got walls and containers, but a cup which is open to holding something, to holding heavenly energy, or to holding the divine presence. So to start off with, we will draw a card for this month, just an archetype that gives a little bit of insight perhaps as to what we're going through, or insight as to what we could do in our lives to become more conscious or to grow. So interesting. We've got the card Gaia, which of course is Mother Earth. And I'll be talking a little bit about Gaia today. Obviously, it's an ongoing theme, Gaia. My perception of Gaia, and I'll go into this in greater detail, has changed recently. And what I've come to understand is that we as physical beings are on this planet having an experience of physicality. And as physical beings, we are an extension of that energy of Gaia, of Mother Earth. And we are like actors on the stage, and through our acts and through what we do, we're helping create Gaia at the same time. We're not kind of, lowly worshippers of this incredible energy of Gaia. We are full participants. And of course, Gaia as an entity, as a realm, is greater than us, but we have a role to play in each one of our individual lives to help better Gaia, or to help become more aware of Mother Earth. So it's interesting that card came up. In this deck of cards, the protagonoi, or primal gods, relate to new beginnings. So in this case, in the case of Gaia, it's a new beginning in the earth realm. So of course, what could be a better omen than getting that card on the first day of this process? So it's about creating a new foundation in the world, creating a new physical foundation, perhaps in terms of a project or a focus or an area as well. Gaia is also about abundance. So it's about creating a new entity or container for abundance in our lives. But I will talk further about the sort of Gaia energy within this heaven on earth context, because there are a few sort of slightly different philosophical ways and approaches that we will explore. So, of course, just a brief introduction to how this course will work over the course of the next 10 sessions, which will take us into December. This will be a once a month, more or less, process. In every session that I run for this process, I will record the session, and I will put the recording on YouTube for those of you who do sign up. And so if you can't make the live session, that's fine. There will be the recordings available. It's always obviously lovely to be in the live session, because somehow the energy is that much more powerful when we're all together and when the energy converges. But if you can't do that, that's not a problem. This is the third year now that we're doing this 1 year process. And for many of you, you've already done the 2 previous years. Of course, if this is your first year of doing it, That doesn't matter. It's not necessarily a continuous course. So we will have the breathwork training aspects for the newcomers, but that will involve a slightly different approach to the breathwork training. It will involve some private sessions for the newcomers, and also I'll make available some of the previous year's recordings that you can look at some of the theory and get some of that experience. But this journey that we're doing here, this live 1 year process, of course, for everyone, is about showing up every month, keeping going with this guided process, which is not only about, the information and the theory that we share, it's also very much about the practices that we share. And these sessions are very much meant to be practical. They're very much meant to be experiential. So doing the breath work is really important. I suggest you do the breath work a few times in the month. Different layers always come up, different understandings always come up in repeating the breathwork sessions. So I definitely suggest that you do those breathwork sessions often. And therefore, this ongoing process, given that we've got, all these people focusing in and working on themselves and focusing this energy onto this collective theme, heaven on earth, that of course does build a momentum, that does build an entity and an energy that we feed on the one hand, but on the other hand, that feeds us. So this process becomes something very powerful that works consciously, but also very much subconsciously. And the whole idea of the 1 year process, of course, is to better manifest the sort of life that you want to create. Yes, it's got a training aspect. Yes, it's got a learning aspect. But the learning mainly comes through doing the inner work and then seeing how that manifests in our lives out there. I believe all spiritual work should somehow reflect and show and manifest in our outer lives. It doesn't have to be, work orientated or money orientated or relationship orientated, but there should be more flow in your life as you grow. Life should feel more on purpose, in some ways more effortless. There's often and usually further, struggles to work through or further layers to peel off. But as we learn the tools, somehow it becomes easier. Somehow we can maybe step back a little bit from getting involved in the drama, from getting involved in all of those emotions. And we can set free that emotional energy that sometimes seduces us and sucks us in, so that we can stand back a little bit, work through our challenges in a different way, with a different energy, with a transformed approach. And then, of course, at the same time, we can invite more. We can learn to invite more. And again, that is why this theme of heaven on earth, I believe, is so important in this time. I believe that humanity is kind of standing on this tipping point. I'm sure many of you have heard of this, this principle of the new earth, but reality splitting, whereas before we had kind of one stage, one reality where humanity was sort of acting on, but a point is coming where that reality starts to split, where there's kind of the old earth, the old 3D way of doing things. That is a choice. And then there is sort of the 5D, the higher love, the higher light frequency. That is another choice that people make. And there is no wrong or right in this choice, but it is a choice that individuals make, and therefore smaller collectives make, to go in different directions. If we choose, anger, outrage, fear, pain, if we're stuck in those stories, if those stories are very, convincing, and if we just absolutely love the adrenaline of that, for example, then we might go to that more 3D approach, third dimensional approach, which is of separation, me against the world. I'm good, the world or someone out there in the world is bad. That kind of dualistic struggle that often happens. Choosing to go into that fifth dimensional reality, that heaven on earth reality, doesn't mean that there won't be struggles, perhaps, or certain things to work through, certain challenges. But it's a different quality. It's no longer that dramatic struggle and kind of a waste of emotional energy. Kind of a waste, of course it's not a waste. That emotional energy can also be transformative. But it's about going into a different approach to our spirituality and to how we function as an individual within a community, as a smaller collective. One could say the bigger collective is, the entire human race. And then, of course, within that, there are different smaller collectives. And those aren't necessarily only cultural. I think they're very much more about kind of tribes. It's, as all of you know, there are certain people that have certain attitudes that you just resonate with and that just fit your world vision and world perspective. So I believe this is a time of us kind of finding our tribes. And one tribe isn't better than another. It's a different language. There are certain common languages that we speak on a soul level that are just more fitting for where we want to go and the way in which we want to live our lives. And I think it's really important that we start to gain the self-knowledge in our lives, not only to know the traumas or know our limitations and work beyond them, but to know ourselves in such a way that we can honor ourselves and respect ourselves enough to say, this is what I love doing in life, this is who I am in life, and I'm going to put the energy into dedicating myself to that more. I'm going to make more space in my life for that. And I think once we make that sort of commitment to the way that we want to live our lives, obviously within let's say a fifth dimensional or a higher frequency perspective, as we make a little bit more space opens, so we can fill that extra space with a little bit more of that higher energy, a little bit like we were doing with our cocoon. And in that way, incrementally, that reality that we build grows. So, yes, of course, we have families and we have jobs and we have things that we have to do in the world. That doesn't mean that we just drop everything that doesn't fit our perspective of, what heaven on earth is, and we just, sort of run off into the wild and sort of live heaven on earth. I think it's more about step by step opening more and more space, changing the way that we see the world, transforming the quality of our experiences. So even if there's a job that you don't really love very much, but you have to do it for financial reasons, and instead of going to that job with resentment and anger, even though it might not be the first choice of what you would like to be doing with your time, go to that job with love and with finding the ways in which that job can become a vehicle for your highest growth. And at the same time, something that you can love and appreciate. And that's really hard. I realize it's really hard. Relationships are equally hard. When we are with someone who we have loved and where the relationship changes, as it inevitably does. And of course, after a year or 5 years or 10 years, our needs in a relationship change, our projections onto that other person change, just as theirs onto us changes, so that the relationship dynamic may be different. And it might become hard to live with that person or to love that person. So I think even in that situation where we're facing this mirror of our partner, it's always important again to hold that energy of love and respect and gratitude. That doesn't mean we have to stay with them forever. That doesn't mean that we have to allow bad behavior or accept bad behavior in our lives, or behavior that doesn't fit our kind of soul journey. And that's of course where we have to make the decisions, do we stay, do we go? But whenever we're in a situation where we do kind of have to stay in a difficult situation, be that a job or relationship or whatever, we can still be in that space from a heaven on earth, from a fifth dimensional perspective, within that frequency. And as we consciously hold that frequency, and as we consciously cultivate that frequency, even in the difficult space, that frequency, that job, that relationship will start to change from within, and it'll start to transform from within. And then at some point, the big shift will come, and that relationship or that job will have undergone some sort of alchemy, or your reality will have undergone some sort of alchemy, where you can either, sort of change the job, or whether the relationship shifts into more love or a new relationship comes along. But we can actually then work through the old conditions that keep us in the hell on earth, which of course is the opposite of heaven on earth. We can break out of the hell on earth that we create for ourselves in order to make more and more space for heaven on earth. So just as this reality is kind of splitting at this time, whereas maybe before the energetic setup of Mother Earth, Mother Gaia, was about one planet, one way, there is a metaphoric, symbolic split taking place. I think we're already quite, we're quite along the road of that split. Some people say that the split started sort of in the 80s, 90s, where it started to come apart. I think definitely in the last 5 years that split has become very apparent. And the navigation within this time of choice is that we have to keep choosing heaven on earth. We have to keep choosing to go to the place that we want to go to. Not getting hooked out by what other people are saying and doing, but just maintaining our center and staying on course, navigating in the direction that is right for us. And of course, that navigation comes from continued ongoing self-knowledge, self-understanding on the one hand, and on the other hand, the continued drawing in of higher consciousness and higher awareness. And that, of course, takes us back always to love, to unity consciousness, to acceptance, to gratitude, to living in joy and finding the ways to cultivate joy as much as possible. So those are some of the very simple ways that we keep choosing heaven on earth. And in next session, next month, we will focus a little bit more on hell on earth, on the ways in which we have created or have been led to believe that this world is a hellish place, or where we've learned to experience our world through the hell of some of our traumas, and we've turned that into a very convincing reality, a very convincing play. So we want to explore some of those just to see what we're up against. But this session, we will focus a little bit more just on laying the foundation for what the actual heaven is. What is the heaven on earth that we wish to create? So I just want to go back to what I was speaking about before of Mother Earth, Mother Gaia, being kind of a work in process. We are part of Earth, given that our bodies are made up of particles of earth, particles of density, of matter. And I do believe, one of the maybe confusions or one of the sort of philosophical difficulties that we face is that principle. And again, this is very much a personal opinion, and you might have a different opinion. But this idea that this world is all an illusion, and given the fact that it's an illusion, maybe it doesn't matter that much. And a lot of religions, especially Buddhism, really hold that principle very strongly, that this world is an illusion. And yes, this world is an illusion. It's not to say that it's not. It's not to say that this is not Maya. A lot of the ways in which reality is constructed is kind of paradoxical. There's certain rules, but then there's always a gray area around some of the edges of those rules. I think we as humans, we always seek certainty, and we seek to be right or to find the right way. And it's kind of funny and uncanny how there are so many systems out there that are said to be the right way. There is no universal right way. It's kind of each one of us, and maybe that depends on the tribes, that our soul tribes that we're born into, that determines what ultimately is right for us. So yes, this reality is an illusion in the way, but in another way, we have been born into this reality, into this physical body, into this physical world. And this experience actually demands a lot of energy. It demands a lot of time. Yes, in the bigger scheme of things, in terms of the, let's say, unfolding and evolution of the universe, our individual lifetimes are, just the blink of an eye. It's a very short experience. And one could say, yes, each individual is very unimportant. But I do believe that we are invested, our soul is invested in this experience that does feel like a very deep and extensive exploration of self and of the world. That, in terms of the relativity, we are important and our lives are important. And even though in the bigger picture, yes, it's an illusion, on another hand, this is kind of a stage, a very important stage, where we are reacting, but also in which we are acting, in which we are creating. We are co-creators in this physical world. And one of the principles that I've been exploring, and this ties in with this idea of us participating in the evolution of Gaia, is that this reality is a stage, and it's kind of a perfectible reality. It's not just an illusion that's all going to fall away when we die or when our consciousness changes state. This is a place where, through our creation, we can actually focus our consciousness and what we've learned into the world, and that can then help improve the world. And I believe that great art, great thinkers, great philosophies, great philosophers have contributed to that perfectibility of this reality. And, just as we, in creating sort of a better world for our children, perhaps, or for our communities in the long term, contribute to an ongoing sort of evolution within this world, this co-creation that we're part of is therefore important. And I think a lot of old cultures, old civilizations, certainly the Peruvian civilizations, the Incas, certainly Bali, certainly Japan and China, traditionally, certainly the ancient Greeks, they really worked towards creating these utopian states. They didn't always succeed, and there were always factors that made them fall short, perhaps. But I always use the example of Peru, for example, where the people lived in, these magnificent landscapes and in these magnificent mountains, for example, these very rich places, and they enhanced the nature around them. They built terraces, not only for crops and to feed themselves, but also terraces of flowers to create beauty, or where a mountain looked like the profile of a human being, or it looked like, the wings of an eagle, they would actually sculpt and enhance those profiles to make them look more like, let's say, a person or a totem animal. So in that way, there was this constant interaction with beautifying the world, enhancing nature, and through artwork. And I believe artwork is, first of all, on the first hand, developing skill, developing ability, and then through the work, through the artwork, putting layer upon layer upon layer of not only paint, let's say, in the example of painting, but also of consciousness into that thing that is being created. And when a great painting is created, especially when it holds some sort of universal truth or spiritual truth, 500 or 2000 years later, it still carries an energy and it still holds a certain ideal. And one very simple example of that is the way in which ancient Greek and Roman sculpture inspired the Renaissance and continues to inspire us today. They were, through their art, there was a certain perfection those Greek sculptors arrived at in those works of art that still inspire and hold a really high vision today. So these works of art or architecture or written works become these kind of pillars of higher consciousness. And in this world, when we work to resonate with some of those higher principles, when we cultivate our understanding of them, we are already starting to create heaven on earth. But heaven on earth is more than that. Heaven on earth is also the principle that we don't need to drop our bodies and die in order to experience paradise. We already have this incredible paradise around us. Unfortunately, this paradise has become polluted by some of the bad thoughts or some of the bad visions of others, of individuals, or certain forces of humanity. And I believe that just as you have these great creators who have sought to uplift humanity, you have other creators who are using their creativity to sow destruction. They're also being creative in that way because they're actually taking us away from our natural human desire and ability to love, and our natural desire and ability to live in beauty and harmony. They've actually used certain philosophies and narratives to run counter to kind of what's natural to us as human beings. And they've kind of subjected us to some of their systems and philosophies and so forth. So again, that is where it is up to us to choose. Where do we want to go? How do we want to live our lives? What are the qualities that we want to cultivate in our lives? So again, we'll explore the hell on earth principle next month. But the heaven on earth principle then is finding the ways and the conditions to make our lives and the lives of our community as excellent as possible, to work towards creating excellence or perfection in our day-to-day lives. And that is about cultivating an inner garden, an inner peace, an inner centeredness, and then finding the ways to sort of express that in the world outside. And those are some of the practices that we'll be working with. For me, it always comes back to that principle of, I think it's Voltaire that said it, of cultivate your garden. That's kind of all that we can do in this life, is cultivate our garden. And of course that is symbolic and metaphorical. Can be literally cultivating a garden, but it's making the space around your life just a little bit better. And that could touch other people, or it could be in your physical realm. Obviously it somehow needs to start in the inner process of, and I think some of the first steps are the self-exploration, seeing the ways in which we get in our own way, the ways in which we get in God's way, the ways in which we create hell for ourselves, and reaching the point where we realize, I don't need to live in hell. I don't need to perpetuate hell out there. Very often when we grow up, and this of course is one of the big issues in this process of learning to cultivate heaven on earth, is most of us are pretty much brought up with some sort of concept of hell. There's hell and there's heaven. And earth is maybe somewhere in between, but it's kind of a scary place. And it's a scary place, it's not a very perfect place, but we kind of don't want to die, because when we die we might either go to heaven or hell, and probably we're scared of going to hell. And hell might not be the place of the devil. Hell might just be a place of the void, where the ego just disintegrates and there's nothing left. So there is this kind of trepidation around these concepts. And I think for many people, that principle of heaven is also very much about, the road to heaven is very narrow, and you've got to do this and that, you've got to sacrifice, you've got to be good, you've got to follow certain doctrines and rules in order to get to heaven. And if you don't follow those rules, you're going to go to hell because you've missed the mark. And even though it's very infantile, obviously a lot of those concepts are programmed into us when we're children. So some of those infantile emotional connections and emotional reactions to these concepts stay in place. So we want to, of course, demystify heaven and demystify the concept of hell. It's all happening here. Yeah, there are two ways of reaching heaven. One way is to die and to go to the other realm. I do believe that when we die, we kind of drop the body, of course, and we go into the beyond, and we go into a space where we merge more with our eternal self, with our greater self. But then I believe that whenever we have attachments still to this world in different ways, attachments to certain emotions, maybe karmic attachments to other souls, that maybe we need to come back and explore those karmic attachments in future lives. Those are some of the ways that we kind of kept out of, completely going out and sort of transcending into a broader reality, a place of peace and expansion and greater connectedness to God. So that's the one way, is to die and to ascend to the degree that one can let go of the attachments to this world. And I do believe that whatever attachments we maintain in this world is what we will come back to explore in the next lifetime. And then the other way, of course, is to attain heaven on earth, which is to go through the processes of dying, small deaths, symbolic deaths, ego deaths. And every time we have this ego death, we drop a little bit more of the personality that has kept us limited and stuck and divided and fear-filled and angry. We drop little bits of those, and we're born a little bit more every time into higher being. And one could say that every time we die, sort of the walls of this cup of our being are redefined, and every time we're reborn, we kind of open a little bit more space, so that cup becomes a little bit bigger and a little bit better as a container. And then maybe we go through another sort of ego death, and these walls then get redefined or softened, or, you know, we can work with them. And then the next time we're reborn, you know, as this higher energy fills, it naturally fills out the space of the cup and kind of shapes the cup in a new way to allow in more of that divine energy. And that is how this process of ego deaths and rebirths, which is an incredibly important theme in all spirituality, then allows us to sort of flower and to expand and to be able to hold more of this earth energy, of this heaven energy on earth.
I just wanted to add one thing about what you were saying about cultivating your inner garden. And that's really beautiful. I think I'm noticing a lot of like our attention and the time, the amount of attention, every moment is so precious. And there's so many people who are just giving their time, attention, and energy away.
Absolutely.
So every moment counts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And yes, what you say is so true. You know, we give so much of our time and energy away to the dreams and the thoughts and the narratives of others. Or, you know, we get caught up in other people's visions, or in sort of, let's say, structures that maybe frustrate us, and then we give our energy away to that. I think one of the principles of heaven on earth as well is kind of remembering, unless of course if we are, you know, particularly genius in what we do, but kind of remembering that we are not going to save the world. You know, I am not going to save millions and millions of people. Most people, vast majority of people, are not going to save millions and millions of people. We often have this savior complex of we've got to make this huge difference. Yes, we need to make a difference in our world, and that can still touch many people, but it's going to be quite rare for us to be able to change the course of politics or change some sort of leader or some sort of movement. And that actually becomes frustrating, and it actually becomes disempowering when we can't make change on that bigger level. So we can act and react in our worlds, and we always need to remember that that is what's important. And again, that comes back to cultivating our own garden. It's when we cultivate our own garden, we create quality for ourselves, and we can create quality for others. And, you know, maybe when our vision does grow and get bigger, we can make quite a big difference in the world. But we don't have to save everything, and we don't have to save everyone. We can't. It's about doing the best that we can here and now. And usually, you know, when we bring more of this heavenly being into our bodies and into our direct lives, that in itself already creates huge sort of inspiration, and it does bring light and love into the lives of others. So, you know, what we do in the world is incredibly important, and the difference that we make in the world is incredibly important. And again, we're creative beings. You know, I believe part of the heaven on earth frequency is to do what you love and to have fun doing what you love, and to do what you love with passion. And of course, that passion is infectious, but also passion is very generous, because when we're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like an effort. It doesn't feel like hard work. It's an overflowing extension of our personal expression. And that, of course, is what abundance is in its kind of purest form. It's this passion just kind of flowing and overflowing and making it possible for us to get done what we want to do, to create what we want to create, but to actually do that in joy. And as an abundant, overflowing energy. And of course, these are steps that we learn. And the first step always is love and gratitude. And even if we just start with love and gratitude as the first step in everything that we do, that's already making a huge difference to the energy and how the energy is used and unfolds. So further in this process, from month to month over the next year, I want to explore the different realms or heavens from sort of ancient and sort of Renaissance philosophy, alchemical philosophy, which is the different levels. So, for example, they believed, and this is of course metaphorically speaking, I'm not necessarily talking literally here, they believed that the world was the center of the universe. And from our perspective, it is the center of the universe because everything else kind of spins around it. And then, if you had the world at the center, then we had the different spheres. So you had the sphere of the moon, and then you had the sphere of Mercury, and then Venus. So the different planets represented, of course, a different orbit, but that orbit was seen as a sphere, and that sphere is seen as a level of consciousness. So we're going to explore some of these spheres as a form of working with and grounding these energies month by month. So for example, the moon level sphere, which is what we'll work with next month, relates to the metal of silver, and it relates to the world of the dreams and the subconscious, our subconscious fears, our instincts. So we're going to work with the philosophy of it, and we'll have exercises to work with that. But we're also going to work with silver itself, silver as an energy that can help hold a particular space and that can help us resonate with a particular frequency. Now, there's a lot of wisdom in alchemy and in some of the symbols they used as support for their philosophy. So, we'll work from the moon to Mercury, Venus, then the sun, which represents gold, of course, and the ego, and then Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn is the seventh heaven, and that seventh heaven represents the last kind of embodied level of consciousness. From beyond that, we go into the beyond. Just as I spoke about the aura during the visualization, our physical body is the most dense aspect of us. Then our aura, which is, more or less this big, that is kind of a body of light. It's less dense than the body, but it's more dense than what's outside the aura. Even though outside the aura, our own being does still continue as a continuum, but it's not, of course, as dense and as focused and as present. So that continuum then kind of fades as it goes out. And Saturn, or that seventh heaven, is the same in terms of this kind of realm or this kind of heavenly consciousness that we're working with. And then from there, we'll work with bringing it all back, working through those different heavens and realms, and then bringing it back to Earth and grounding it into Earth. And that might sound complex or mystical in some way, but it will be very practical. And it's not a whole lot of theory that you have to deal with, but there will be some principles that we'll talk through, which are very applicable to our psychology and our physical being and the process of manifestation. As I said earlier, this 1 year process is about learning certain things, and it's about community, but above all, it's about manifestation. It's about checking in every month, having certain work, exercises, practices to do every month to help us live better lives in practical ways. And when we do it over the period of a year, that gives us enough time to be able to observe what's happening, to give us a focus and an intention, but at the same time to give us the space to see how those things manifest and come about. So it really is fun. For those of you who have been doing it for 2 years, I'm sure you can all attest It's a wonderful community that we create. There's wonderful sharing. We do create like a signal group as well, where people can share and give feedback and talk about what's happening in their lives. We are just going to take a short break now before we go into the breath work. When we come back, we will do a reality shifting, a practical experience just to sort of set the tone for the breath work afterwards. So for that, you'll just need to have a bit of space to step forwards and backwards in physical space. And then for the breath work, I'm going to ask during your break, if you haven't done so already, that you set up a bed for yourself. It can just be a mattress on the floor, or you can lie on a couch or on your bed. But of course, just a comfortable mattress and pillow, and you'll need a cover as well, because the body temperature may drop during the breath work. And I also suggest that whatever device you're using to listen to this session now, I suggest that you connect that to a speaker so that you have sort of, better sound and sort of more of a surround sound experience for the breath work.